Hello, Grace docents. Welcome back to another year of Grace Arts at Willow Springs. For our first artist in October, we're going to be teaching the kids about Piet Mondrian. He lived from 1872 to 1944. He was born in Holland, in a small town outside of Amsterdam. His father was a headmaster at a local school, and his uncle was a successful painter. And Mondrian was shy and quiet and had trouble making friends. He was taught to be serious, not to show emotion, and he lived a very ordered and controlled life. So that's going to be an interesting thing to ask the kids. How do you think this affected his art? Because if you're not familiar with Mondrian, as you'll see as we get through the presentation, his artwork became very ordered and controlled. Versus his early works, later in life versus his early works. Here he can be seen with his fiancée, Griet, in 1914. So drawing and painting were a real comfort to him, and he showed his talent to his father, but his father insisted he become a teacher. So what Mondrian decided to do was do both. He became an art teacher and an artist. In 1892, his uncle helped him to study at the National Academy of Art in Amsterdam. And Mondrian went through various stages until he finally arrived at his artistic destination, which is the geometric patterns and primary colors and non-colors in his artwork. So this is an early work of his, a self-portrait in 1900. So he had a moderately successful career as an art teacher and an artist. This painting, as well as the ones you'll see on the next two slides, are examples of his early work. Landscapes using watercolors in very muted colors, which will be a contrast. As you can see, muted colors here, the landscapes, be a contrast to what his final works, where he sort of ended up. So he moved to Paris in 1911, where he saw an exhibit of Pablo Picasso and other Cubist artists. And you can explain to the kids in Cubism, three-dimensional forms are broken down into angular shapes or cubes. And shapes are really more important than color there. So he was very influenced by this exhibit and this style of artwork. So his art underwent a dramatic change. He sought to eliminate the world of nature and man from his paintings. He didn't use curved lines, the organic shapes anymore. He only started using straight lines and geometric shapes. He also got rid of color, almost all color, except black, white, gray, and the primary colors. So what you see here, the blue tree, was actually created in 1908, before he saw the Cubist exhibit. So you can compare this with a series of Cubist paintings that you'll see on the next slide that he created with the theme of the tree over the next 3 years after having seen the exhibit. So here you can see that this tree is undergoing several changes. So you can see how the tree goes from color in the previous slide to just black lines, patches of color. So he's really abstracting the tree. This process is called abstraction. So you're taking the image, reducing it down to just lines and shapes, and it no longer resembles the actual tree that you were looking at, for instance, when you were drawing the picture. So you can see how it's undergoing some changes here. This still life with ginger pot also started undergoing some changes. So you can see how it's moving from a more realistic picture to more abstract in the colors and shapes on the right. And so as his style developed, the colors started becoming bolder and the shapes became larger and more solid. So on these posters here, you can see how it evolved. This abstract geometry that he started using evolved over time and really became much different from his early landscape paintings. When he returned to Amsterdam in 1914, with the outbreak of war, his paintings really had lost all reference to real objects. So in 1919, Mondrian returned to Paris. He was disappointed that art in Paris had not kept up with him. His canvases were grids of black lines filled in with primary colors, as you can see here. And this is really, these are what you may think of when you think of Mondrian. So his art really excited a lot of Dutch artists. And in 1917, he launched a magazine with a fellow artist, Theo van Doesburg, called De Stijl. And it is translated as the style from Dutch. And so in this, they wrote about their theories and their ideas about art. And Mondrian believed that the essence of painting was line and color. So this end table here that you see is a pure application of De Stijl aesthetic to furniture design. The founders of De Stijl wrote a long manifesto about their beliefs. But the main beliefs that they had about art and their theories were the basic form is the rectangle. The basic colors are red, yellow, and blue, which are the primary colors. The non-colors are black, white, and gray. And you can see in this photo, this was Mondrian's studio, and you can see how this really reflects his beliefs in art theory. So they applied these theories to all kinds of art, painting, sculpture, architecture, and so forth. And the movement itself lasted about 17 years, but it was very influential, and it had long-term effects on design as a whole. We have an architecture example here, the Schroeder House, and this is one of the best known examples of De Stijl architecture. So you can see here the lines, the colors, the rectangles, some things to point out to the kids. This is also a building that had a facelift on the outside there. This is on Sunset Boulevard Hotel, and it's another example. You can see the lines, the rectangles, the primary colors on the outside of the building. And then we have another example of furniture design here in the chair on the right. So in 1939, Mondrian moved to New York to escape the coming World War II. He loved New York City. He was also very affected by the jazz music that was popular. So this is a piece that he did called Broadway Boogie Woogie. So you can see it's a little bit different than some of the others that we've seen. And you can ask the kids, you know, why do you think he liked New York? What changes do you see in Broadway Boogie Woogie from his previous works? You know, New York is certainly laid out as a grid. The streets are grids, lines, rectangles, and so forth. And that, along with jazz music, maybe the energy in New York City, all the movement, I think really is reflected in Broadway Boogie Woogie as well, with all the primary colors, very little of the gray and the black. Also, it feels like it has a lot more movement than some of the other pieces that he had done up to that point because of all of the little squares and rectangles that he's put in place with these different primary colors. So it might be an interesting conversation to have with the kids there. He was working on Victory Boogie Woogie when he died in 1944 at the age of 77. I don't know how he died. I did not look that up. The children often ask. Feel free to look it up on your own, and if it's something appropriate to tell them, you certainly can. He wasn't very successful in his lifetime, but he was one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. So here we can see Victory Boogie Woogie, which he was working on when he passed away. There's a timeline here at the end. So that is Piet Mondrian. And check out the next video for the projects.